such a tender chapter to reflect on, but I'm amazed. I'm amazed by our neuroplasticity. I'm amazed by the transformation that is available for a human who once was completely frozen.
How you doing today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm excited to get into things with you. You've had a really long and interesting journey in the entertainment industry and now growing your personal brand, and you're still very young, so there's a lot more to come. But I think it's good to set the scene by taking things back a little bit and starting with your early roots in entertainment. And I know you grew up in Ohio, which is, not your typical place for somebody to get involved in the entertainment scene. So let's talk about that. How did you first get involved in that and form that passion?
Sure. I started dancing at the age of 3 in Toledo, and I just wanted to be like my older sister, who was already enrolled in the same studio. And then around age 6, we had this unexpected opportunity to work alongside this modeling group in the local area. And they were attending this convention and bringing some young people to audition for professionals. And we decided that we would make it a bit of a family trip. It's kind of a vacation, a break from schooling. And I was very fortunate to be able to do that. And the feedback was very positive. And they strongly recommended visiting Los Angeles and, trying to get an agent and kind of going into this, what I call a bit of a pipeline. And thankfully, it's a bit of a double edged sword, but thankfully, I flew to Los Angeles and almost immediately started auditioning and booking work. And that kind of forced us into some decisions early on about relocating the entire family. I have 2 sisters. As well as whether this was considered a passion or a career. And I'm not even double digits yet, and I'm starting to consider things that have to do with financial well-being and shifts in the family dynamic. So there was a lot of pressure that accompanied that journey. There was also a lot of privilege and a lot of beauty that I was able to lean into these creative pursuits so young. But, with all of us, we simply try to make the most of our experiences and turn it all into something purposeful.
Well, it sounds like everything happened quite fast, at least relatively. At that time, were you excited and passionate about where this was going, or was it kind of like you didn't even have time to really think about it?
You're touching on a very important quality of the pace of entertainment, and that is you're either on the hamster wheel or you're not in the business. And so I was training fairly regularly. And of course, the aspect of novelty and being a sponge at a young age and being surrounded by, these effervescent personalities and these very artistic, environments. That was, of course, very fun, very inspiring. But also, I spent more time auditioning than I did in school. So, there was a bit of an imbalance, and my family did their best, I believe, to keep me involved in, local rec sports teams and taking breaks if I could, but that simply didn't happen very often because of contractual obligations, as well as, like I said, you get on that hamster wheel and wow, it seems to only accelerate. Um, and there's also this aspect of feeling kind of disempowered generally as an artist. You feel a bit like you're the bottom of the totem pole. So from the audience's perspective, actors may seem like the stars of the show, but 99% of us are actually the ones running around town, trying to get our next job that only lasts a day, fiercely competitive, seemingly scarce opportunities, always a demand to maintain or improve your craft, knowing your archetype, all these different psychological and physical factors. So that really keeps you busy, very preoccupied. And if you don't know how to balance that, if you don't have a healthy distance from it, it can consume you in some pretty gnarly ways, which I wasn't exempt from.
So I think you used the word pressure when you're talking about that initial situation and picking up and moving to LA. I mean, I can see how that would be a heavy pressure situation given the fact that it's your whole family picking up and going. So I'm sure your parents had to find new work and your siblings had to, get re-involved in new schools. And here you are being thrust into the spotlight and, that can be a lucrative financially business. So did you feel that pressure, do you think, because so much was riding on you and your career and everybody was making this move to facilitate you moving forward?
Well, there's explicit pressure and there's implicit pressure. And at face value, my family wanted me to remain healthy and did not ever tell me that I needed to provide for anyone. It's the implicit pressure of recognizing if my sisters don't like the course of their life, and it's because we uprooted them from their social ties in such formative years, and that there's the potential for resentment or, other discord between us. It's heartbreaking, and there's an implicit pressure there. And, that combines with a child's natural temperament. So I, tend to be more of the overachiever, perfectionistic type. So by nature, I wanted to make sure I got everything right, and I was a very good kid. And so it does really shape and contort everyone in the family. And I will let my sisters and my parents speak for themselves, but we've all faced significant health challenges, social challenges, career challenges because of the sacrifices, because of the costs. And when people on the outside just say, "Hey, I want to get my toddler into the industry," that's why I'm advocating so passionately for media literacy courses and industry literacy courses and different resources for families to be able to make more conscientious decisions, and also to check their motives. My family never ever said that I had to do this. It was more so that suddenly I was on a series, and you either get fired because you stop showing up to work, or you fulfill your obligation. There were important lessons to learn also about working hard and showing up for your gig. So it's very complex, very layered, and very unusual and hard to relate to.
So you get to LA, you start working. Do you enjoy it in the beginning? And if so, how long does it take before that starts to wear on you and you start to think, "Huh, maybe this isn't for me."
Well, for me, it's not an either or. It's a both and. So even through all of the pain and turmoil, I still enjoy the process of creativity and expression, the catharsis that comes with portraying characters. Also, the impact of storytelling and meeting people who relate to the stories you've told. So it's all of the above, all at once. I would say from 6 to 13. I was getting into the groove. I was establishing myself, which sounds so wild. Um, in the city, knowing casting directors by name, establishing rapport and showcasing that, hey, when you hire her, she's really going to deliver. And then around age 13, what I noticed were behaviors around food restriction and exercise obsession, and different behaviors that started to control my day-to-day decision making. And that's when I knew, oh, okay, I'm experiencing some sort of uh, overwhelm, or I'm passing my threshold, my ability to cope here, and I'm starting to overextend into these interesting responses and coping mechanisms. And so around 13, I had to start considering, do I need professional support for something like this? There's a lot of shame that accompanies that as well, because you think, no, it must just be something wrong with me. Surely I can just course correct. But once you're so deeply involved in a certain lifestyle, and that lifestyle is even largely encouraged by your peers in the surrounding industry, it can be tough to admit to yourself where you do need help, and to go through that process of shifting, because that's going to have repercussions. Taking a break at 13 would have meant not going on to do, I think, somewhere around 45 to 50 films and projects over the next several years. So I kept going. I went and went and went and went until about 17 and a half. And I realized, if I get professional care in rehab, uh, if I go in as an adult, that's going to be a very different experience than going to rehab for people who have not yet turned 18. So I decided, okay, I need to get in there before this all unravels and spirals.
So when you say rehab, what was the type of rehab? Like, what were you in there for?
Yeah, I never experimented with substances. It wasn't substance abuse. It wasn't drug addiction. My addictions and vices are actually very societally praised, like achievement, and absurd amounts of cortisol in the body at all times. So I was in there for eating disorders specifically. What we learned is that I also had a condition called alexithymia, and that's the inability to name and experience and identify emotions and sensations in your body. So, ironically, I was this actress who could emote on cue, but I myself was very disconnected from my body. That's a fairly common trauma response as well. So I learned some language around my disordered eating, as well as alexithymia, as well as generalized anxiety. And I learned, which was kind of heartbreaking, that what I was embodying and demonstrating largely coincides with, depression, for most of my childhood and teenhood. Now, I'm happy to report it's a very different lived experience. But those were tough pills to swallow, but no real pills were swallowed.
So it sounds like at such a young age, you were so aware of what you were going through. And when you decided to, check yourself in and get help and go to rehab, was that totally based on your understanding of what you were going through and what you needed? Or were there people there to help mentor you and guide you to get help?
There were warning signs for a while. I went to an audition once, and the casting director didn't even allow me to read the script because I was so gaunt and frail. And she said, "You need to take care of yourself. And when you do, come back and read for me." And that was alarming because to that point, most people had celebrated the thinness and the, obsession, and the exceptional whatever. My family knew that I was not only running the treadmill on the treadmill, but the treadmill was running my life. um, my family could tell at holiday events that I was really struggling around food and meal times. Um, so there were warning signs, but the difficulty is there are so many things to consider when you're in the public eye. If you admit yourself to rehab, the stories immediately in the press become this sob story or this train wreck narrative. And I wasn't that. I was determined not to be that. Whether it was true or not, I was struggling though. So I think I reached a point where I asked myself, "You what is it at what, you know, length will you go to compromise your health in order to do what you love?" And and also, if you don't get a grip on this, you're going to be gripped by it for the rest of your adult life. Your brain is still developing right now. You still have a window of time to shift some gears and reinstate new, better, healthier habits. So, yeah, it was weird to be thinking this critically at this age, because when I did, go into rehab and I was talking with peers, it was very clear we were in very different frames of mind going into this. And I would say I have a lot of fortune in that I had a vision for where I wanted to be after. So I wanted to go in there and get help and get better. Whereas a lot of the young people in there, they didn't have anything established. They were still finding themselves, and that was their identity. And so, I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for my peers in that situation. And I check in with some of them still. And it's amazing to see what recovery can look like and how individualized it is.
Do you think that you pushed off going to get help, like, for a number of years or a period of time because you were in the spotlight and you knew that this would be, covered by the media and brought to the forefront given who you were?
More than anything, I was afraid to slow down. I did not want to lose momentum. If I lose momentum, I lose my career. That was the pressure. And that's the hamster wheel, especially from childhood to adulthood. There's no guarantee that you transition. So there's this looming threat of being irrelevant and also being, pigeonholed to your previous work. I don't know if that's the right term. So it was more so this sense of I can't afford to lose everything that I've built. And it terrified me to think I've invested every ounce of my being since 6 years old into something, and that it could slip right through the cracks, and that there would be this, you know, the thousands of people who could show up and replace me, uh, in seconds. So between that and also the media attention, I was really nervous. Also, just my team at the time, people don't really understand. Maybe I was hiding the severity of it, or maybe there's just not a lot of care for someone's well-being when you're making them money. It's probably a little bit of all of it. But, I didn't hear a ton of people say, "Hey, you know what? Your health really, really matters. You should prioritize that." I did hear people say, "I love your work. I can't wait for you to go on tour. I can't wait for that new film to come out. What else are you working on?" Everyone's favorite question. "So what projects are you working on?" As if it's like you always have to have something happening. I've been on at least a dozen projects at all times since 6 years old. The healthiest thing I could do, which I intend to do in the next several years, is take an entire year off if possible and just be. That would be amazing.
That sounds incredible. And something that, if, someone has the privilege and lifestyle, that sounds like a good thing for anybody.
Right, and of course, that is absolutely, a part of this, but also any kind of time away for me is always in service of how I can better show up for the collective, and so I need to recognize that, it's important to stop, to slow, to pause, to rest. You have to refresh. You
Well, I
have
want to
to.
get into some of the ways that you do that on a regular basis. But first, you mentioned that one audition you showed up to and the fact that they didn't let you audition because they could tell, your health was slipping and you weren't, your health, they could tell there was something wrong. But were you getting any other influence from the industry, people that were helping you and saying, Allison, I can tell, like, we've worked with you for a period of time, I can see you're not doing as well. You need to get help. You need to slow down." Was there any of that? Was the industry there for you in any way as your health was slipping?
Hmm. Sadly, I don't recall many people uh, s- asking about my health or mentioning noticing a difference in a negative way. In fact, I wasn't comparatively, I wasn't the thinnest. So I don't think many people even understood the severity of the struggles because they were using just our clothing size to determine who was and wasn't okay. Very, very appearance driven. Also, you're wearing a ton of makeup to hide the sallow skin. You're wearing hair extensions to hide the hair loss. You're in performance mode. So even if you've experienced non-epileptic, stress-induced seizures, they don't kick in when you're on stage. Therefore, it's kind of swept under the rug. Or people hear about it and go, "Oh no, that must be an isolated incident. See you tomorrow. Get some rest tonight." So I don't recall a lot of support within the industry. And that is unfortunate. And we can change that. But I don't think anyone was overtly trying to harm me per se, largely. So it's the fact that all of this works together in this web that we need to kind of unpack that. It's a whole ecosystem, just like with every industry. We could stand to reimagine how we approach work life balance and expectations of the job and company culture. It's not limited to Hollywood, of course.
And when it comes to the Hollywood scene and kids getting involved at an early age like you did, how common is having a type of experience that you had? Is there anybody that's making it through unscathed as kids, or is this just par for the course?
And that's a great question because 99% of young talent do not experience the notoriety component, but are still paying the same costs. So, from my experience and from the direct messages and people who have responded to my recent op-ed, it seems that it doesn't leave too many people unscathed. Um, and that's why if it's measurable, if we can provide some data, if we can even do some research around this, I think there are huge opportunities to implement different set protocol, to work with the union on maybe supporting more mental health oriented programs, to get mental health practitioners on set, not just for minors, but truly for everyone, crew involved as well. But there are very unique pressures that accompany this process and this industry. So I would say almost everyone who I've talked to has some bruises. Some of those are literal, some of those are figurative.
So, setting up a hypothetical situation here, Allison, say you had a child and they wanted to get involved in the same industry as you. Maybe they wanted to dance, sing, act, you know, one of the many things that you did there. What would you say to them as a parent? How would you guide them through as somebody that's been through that and knows the industry? How would you help them navigate that in a healthy way?
Well, first, there are infinite ways to be creative and to pursue the arts outside of the entertainment industry. There are local theater programs, there are dance studios, there you can paint as a family at home. You can foster the love for art and you can even experience maybe an audition here and there, but it's always about putting the child's well-being first. And I'm not here to incriminate anyone. I'm not here to blame the industry, to shame people for wanting to be involved. I'm here to say what's the most ethical way to approach this, and how as a parent can I be equipped to understand what's going on psychologically and developmentally in my child? Is my child actually in the position to make these kinds of massive decisions about their future when they're only 7 years old? Do they really understand the implications? Do they really understand how it's shaping their literal brain chemistry and physiology? Chances are probably not. So that is my job, to create parameters, and to also let them still be authentically themselves. And this is a dance, right? It's not black or white, but I do not hear I don't hear parents approaching it with this holistic of reasoning, typically. And you better be so anchored in who you are and who you aren't, and know who you are not, because the industry will impose a lot of ideas onto you and your family. So you just have to be ready. But for the most part, I would say I probably wouldn't get my kid involved in the industry. I No. There's also time. Like, you can do that later if you still really love it, but 7 years old full time, absolutely not. Um, some singular experiences that we then process as a family and really check in, and also give you time to reintegrate, and also give you time to still have normal social connections and form your own identity. Yeah, sure, maybe, but like very carefully, very cautiously.
Let's come back to your story and talk about going to rehab. It sounds like at that time there was a lot of different things going on that you wanted to work on. You mentioned anxiety, depression, your eating disorder. How do you begin to unravel that and change, your lifestyle around? What are the first things that you approach to start feeling better?
Well, the first things that I remember in rehab, we weren't focused on tackling the issues themselves. We had to first build an infrastructure. We had to first learn tools that we would call upon when we do tackle the issues and unpack things. So it was a lot of preparation, of learning what it means to be in a resilient place and not a manic or depressive state. Learning what we could do to resource ourselves, to center ourselves. Um, all of these kinds of tools made it possible to even undergo the deep therapy that's necessary. So, I work with therapists, and we've utilized the gamut of tools from EMDR to other cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. I also did equine therapy with horses. That was profound, truly, truly life changing. Um, and that involved my family as well. And it centered, communication skills of how will I, once I'm home, uh, share with my parents I need their help in putting this simple meal together, because to them it's just pouring cereal into a bowl, but for me there's a potential identity crisis or a major trigger. So um it was a lot of adding to the tool belt first, and it was done really slowly. I mean, painstakingly slowly. I could not tolerate much at all. And people could tell, they knew it. So if it meant that day it was just me sitting there, but I was still completely numb and closed off, that's what we did that day. That lasted for months. And even though I've known, my therapist for, I don't know, maybe 13, 14 years now, there are still facets of being uncomfortable sharing things totally openly, emotionally, so I'm still in progress here. But the most important, I think, approach in recovery was move slowly and really honor your needs, honor your pace, and set yourself up for success by having an aftercare plan. If you're going to dig into something that day, what can you do after to rebalance? Because if not, you find yourself going, "Well, I don't wanna go back to that place," or you're, suddenly back in the pit and you can't dig yourself out.
You said go back to the place. Were you going home each and every night? Was this just something you'd spend the day at and then go home?
Oh, no, I was there, full-time, inpatient, and, I believe the first 40 plus nights or so, I was on bed rest predominantly. We needed to just plug some nutrition into my body, and that, wow, was oh, it's such a tender chapter to reflect on, but I'm amazed by our neuroplasticity. I'm amazed by the transformation that is available for a human who once was completely frozen, who experienced, maybe suicidal thoughts, whatever the experience is, to actually shift into an entirely new state of being. That is so motivating, and that's what I want to be able to offer other people.
What was the nutrition protocol like in there? And what was your diet like before? Were you eating a lot of processed foods, fast foods, or were you already aware of eating healthy and implementing that?
Well, from and this is, a bit of a trigger warning for anyone who's experiencing eating disorder, disordered eating. Um, I would not at that time have even considered processed foods, or sorry, not processed, but fast food. That would have been on a long list of no's. My calorie intake, I won't get specific, but it was about, let's say, less than half of a recommended daily amount. And that's not even to factor in that I was a growing kid, um, and an athlete training up to 10 hours a day. So I, at the time, I'm now plant based, but I, at the time, was eating quote unquote everything, but it still ended up being about the same, 7 or 8 foods in very small portions and spaced out in very precise times. Um, and it was a very, very dark period. I had a food journal. I know that can be a really helpful tool for some. It was a very unhelpful tool for me. I would I would even list out, the amount of bites that I had, and polyunsaturated, monounsaturated fat grams. I mean, it was really, really obsessive. So once I was in the program, or once I was in rehab, that was really, they knew to expect, the fear and the anxiety around all of these foods I would suddenly be eating, and I didn't really have a ton of choice. Some of us were on feeding tubes. Some of us needed to drink, multiple inshores every day to make up some of the calorie deficits. There was a point in time I remember I was eating somewhere around, you know, 6,000 calories a day, but because my body was in this kind of hyper something mode, it it still wouldn't gain weight. It was just rejecting or metabolizing whatever that process is. I don't know the science of it. But it was alarming when they would say, "Well, you need to eat this many calories," and I thought, "No, no, no! I've been mapping calories for years. There's no way that that's not going to lead to weight gain." And sure enough, it did not for the first period. And that's also why we were on bed rest. We weren't allowed to exercise to counter any of that intake, and that itself was, wow, really, really challenging. Um, a lot of intense struggles there. Yeah.
So when you start applying this new nutrition plan and start getting, all these nutrients into your body that hadn't been there for a long time, and you start getting these tools to help you, with your mental health, do you start feeling better relatively soon? Like not totally better, but do the gears start moving and do you start feeling like this is working? This is something I'm going to commit to and I can see, you know, you mentioned it was a long path, but I can see a light at the end of the tunnel.
Hmm. I really, really wish that I could say I felt better. I did see a light, but it was a long time because I had so much fear around things, around change, around the unknown. Um, I had so many questions and I had so much to learn and so much to change that it was really just like, let me put one foot in front of the next. I mean, the phrase one moment at a time was my mantra for years, really. But I do know that, um, maybe a year out of rehab, I really started to feel those first glimpses of breakthrough, of new normals being established. But until then, it really had to be, a recommitment every day, um, and a lot of grace, and a lot of acceptance, and a lot of patience. But it's so, so, so worth it, for anyone listening who has a long road ahead. It's either eventually being in a state of wellness, or continuing down a path that is only gonna lead to feeling even worse. So, when those are your choices, taking one step, even if it's a micro step, is still ultimately leading to, a better and brighter future. So I just held on to that. Because, there's in personal transformation, there's what's happening internally, and then there's also, body dysmorphia, so many different factors of the way that you see yourself when you look in the mirror, how that relates to, thoughts, feelings, behaviors, how you occupy space, how you relate to other people. It's all interconnected. So you just have to be really, really kind to yourself and learn how to be an ally in your own transformation. Because, it turns out a lot of people, even when they're trying to support, that's something I learned right off the bat, especially with food related issues. Man, everyone wants to support by telling you what diet to try or how to approach recovery. And you just got to know what's true for you, what's good for you, and say, hey, thank you so much, but that's not helpful for me right now. What would be helpful is this. If you can show up in this way, awesome. If not, I'm going to find the support that I need within myself and or someone else.
And during that recovery process, how long were you an inpatient?
I don't recall exactly. My memory can be a bit fuzzy in that season, but I believe it was probably 2 or 3 months total. And then there was a transition period where we, get a little bit more freedom and a little bit more responsibility to, decide what you're going to eat. You start just implementing like small choices, which a small choice to someone transitioning is quite a big choice. Um, and then once I was home, there was still aftercare and, regular therapy, working with a dietitian, checking in. Um, and and to this day, I'm still in therapy, but I will happily report that um I feel really free in my relationship to food and to wellness. And if anything, it's just sort of my red flag. If I notice some sort of reaction that pertains to what I'm eating or what I'm not eating, I go, "Huh, I wonder what else is going on in life right now that led to this response." And it's nice to see you. I get it. I know you, but we're running a new program now.
It's an alert to you.
Yeah, it's just a signal. And I'm at a point where it can be just that. And it's not, it's not really a loud alarm. It's just more like, oh, okay, hey, old friend, I know you totally mean well. But, here's further context, and here's what we've learned, and here's how we approach this.
So when you're going through recovery, what was your support like from family and friends? Were they there for you and had your back?
Yes, in the best way that they could. Um, Recovery is so unique, and it's so complicated. And a lot of people have great intentions but don't understand the impact of their words, of their behaviors. So you welcome the support, but you also make sure that you can lean on either the professional guidance or finding online resources or communities of people who get it from, a clinical standpoint, and get it from the one who's actually actively in recovery. But for the most part, people wanted to help. And there was also a level of privacy here for me. You don't want to walk around telling people, "Hey, I just got out of treatment." So you want to be able to show up and manage, high stress situations. And sometimes that means you can only do one of those a week. And sometimes it means while you're there, you end up, having moments of being triggered or relapsing or whatever that might look like for an individual. But then you get back on and you keep going. But yeah, I don't think anyone wanted to see me suffer. I just don't think people understand unless they're in it themselves.
And did the media grab a hold of this, or did they leave you alone at that time?
I chose to do everything without the media covering it. It was the best decision I made. I had some peers who announced it publicly. And to be honest, for me personally, that would not have allowed an authentic recovery because I would have felt pressured to come back fully fixed as opposed to being in progress. I also would have tried to microwave that growth. And these are deep seated things that need to be dealt with in a very nurturing and patient way. So the media, didn't know until I came forward, and I loved having that authority over the narrative that I could choose what to say and when to say it. And I waited a lot longer than I probably had to, but it's nice to feel like you're in a different chapter and you're recounting as opposed to, reliving and re-traumatizing yourself or pretending you're better than you are.
So, Allison, when you head into therapy and you decide you're gonna, get to the bottom of this and really heal, was your plan coming out of that to get back into the entertainment industry? And if so, when you left, was that still the plan or had things changed?
Oh. Around 14, I remember asking myself, what would you do if you weren't doing this? And when I tell you, there's a long list of ideas that came to mind. First, I wanted to be an academic, or I wanted to be a neuroscientist. I wanted to be a lawyer. I had all of these different interests. I wanted to be a polymath, and be able to have time to learn different languages. And there were tons of things that came to mind, but I was terrified at leaving this identity. And I wrestled and wrestled and wrestled, but I felt that my decision going into rehab, in some ways, if I committed to healing, it might mean that I got out of the industry. And that's probably also why I prolonged going in there. But I had to be very honest with myself that if I chose to be healthy and I could not find a healthy way personally to reintegrate into entertainment, then would I be willing to step away? Um, Ultimately, finally, after years of going back and forth, I said, "Okay, I'm willing to walk away." Again, that willingness was ultimately so empowering, because then I was finally in a position of choice and not desperation. So, coming out of rehab, I knew I would want to be really slow moving in decision making, but actually I booked a show. I think it was my third audition back. I booked another show and I went, no. It was this strange response of, uh-oh, uh-oh, uh-oh. I didn't mean to get on the hamster wheel again. So, yeah, I had mixed feelings, but now I love that I'm kind of adjacent to entertainment right now. And I still, create content daily, still produce, write, direct, edit, all of it. I'm still on animated shows, but my priority is really with my company Movement Genius. And I think that's what levels everything.
As a kid, there must have been such a high doing what you did. And was part of the fear of, getting out of the industry and doing something different, or maybe even you can look back now and it was more of a subconscious thing. But do you think there was a fear there of not getting to the same high that you had as a kid? I mean, you were so young and you reached so many goals. and then it's like you got a taste for that. Was there a fear of letting that go?
Yeah. I I'm not sure that I was considering the high of audience feedback and, awards and whatnot, but I was fearful of, um, plateauing. There always seemed to be a new tier to reach, not just with fame, but with artistic endeavors. You know, okay, you've been a series regular now. That once was a milestone. Well, now the next milestone is your directorial debut. And after that, then you start your own production company. And there was always something more to strive toward. And while that's inspiring, yeah, it's it's kind of ridiculous as well. Um so I think if anything, I was afraid of plateauing because that in some way in my mind at the time meant I wasn't fulfilling my potential. And I wanted to be able to maximize everything, I had within me. And, now yeah, I view things a bit different, more expansively. But, yeah, oof, the idea of plateauing, that was very scary to me as a kid.
You talked about coming out of recovery and having that audition within a number of months. What did the work look like coming out of recovery? How did you get back on your feet and start creating again?
Wow, I don't fully remember this period, but, um, no one told me to do this, but I wanted to see if I could detach from the performance-driven nature of art and tap into the expressiveness of it. So instead of, the outward performative version, what would it mean for me to go into a dance studio and just move my body freely? To not have choreography, to not have structure. That was really, really difficult, but I knew that it was critical to the kind of growth that I wanted for myself. I always admired people who could freestyle on a whim. I thought, where's that vocabulary coming from, and where's that freedom to just do it? I was so calculated and rigid. So I remember in that period, it had a lot to do with how can this be more honest? How can this be, less me trying to prove to someone that I can fit their role, but more so reclaiming my, original take on something? How can I, every time I go into an audition, tell myself, you're okay no matter what happens? And when I leave the audition and I have a bit of that, anxious panic of, did they like it? Or am I going to be rejected? How can I practice my skills to regulate and then carry on with my day and expand my view again and go, okay, there's more to life than this audition. So I think a lot of it was just bringing all the tools into every experience. And then when you reach your limit, going, okay, this might be too much for me right now. It's too much too soon. And then you have to make the decision. Am I willing to honor that, or am I going to push past it? And um, frankly, I am a pusher. So it's a lesson for me continually to honor my edges and limits. Um, and yeah, and to this day, I could easily work 24/7. Um, yeah, so I have to be intentional about balancing. And it's so important anyway, for so many reasons. But yeah,
What are some of the things you do to keep balance on a day-to-day basis?
there are several. I do have a meditation practice. It's by no means polished, but I will sit for, whether it's 10 minutes or if I have 30, usually it's not 30 at the moment. And my food now it's pretty clean and it's pretty nutrient dense, so I constantly feel fueled in that regard. And it's plant based, and I've just found numerous benefits with mood, with clarity in thinking, and and just also kind of overall weight maintenance. It's been a beautiful gift to go plant-based. Um and then also activity. So, my company conveniently uses movement to improve mental and emotional health. So, I'm often designing programs anyway and experimenting. So, both a chance for me to check in and tune in and use some somatic principles to, bring myself to a state of well being, um, as much as it is, creating and designing to serve other people. And then, yeah, I think for me, it's learning in the morning when I look at my schedule. If I think, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, which domain is going to be the most taxed today, and how can I decide um, a specific thing I can do at the end of the day or in the middle of the day that counters that or that replenishes that domain. That's been super helpful. It's just a practical tool. Um, and overall, the art of no, learning how to say no is is very important for me. Setting clear boundaries. Um, it's a mixture of everything, but I think the most important thing is that it's very personalized and it's very in the moment. It is very much now listening and responding to what's present, and setting myself up for success long term, as opposed to, rigid routines that for me, I cannot uphold with any regularity. My life is far too inconsistent for that.
How long have you been on a plant-based diet? And when you say plant-based, are you referring to vegan, vegetarian? How do you define that?
Yeah, I'm vegan. When it comes to food, I just know that some folks who are vegan get upset if my entire lifestyle doesn't line up, and I'm on my way in that regard. It's been probably 4.5 or 5 years, going on 5 years, and it was actually a former partner of mine was already vegan, and conveniently, he was also a chef. So I didn't have any sense of limitation. In fact, I was learning about new foods I didn't even know existed. And it was very delicious to be vegan. And, being in LA too, there are quite a few options that I recognize. It's not the same everywhere in the States and around the world. But yeah, I've been vegan for about 4.5 years, and for me personally, the benefits were pretty much instant. But now, as someone who's in recovery, I decided to wait. I forget how many years, but even though I hadn't been acting out, or, I hadn't really had any issues or triggers, I really wanted to allow myself double that time before adjusting my diet in any finite way. And I even actually set up some accountability systems with my partner, with family, with my therapist to say, hey, as I'm going to enter into this shift, can we check in? Can we see how my brain is interpreting this? If I'm just really subconsciously trying to find a new way to restrict, um, and so for me, the attitude going into that shift was, what am I gaining, not what am I losing by making this adjustment? And how is this a holistic change to my lifestyle? And that, I think, really it brought a lot of beauty. Um, and like I said, like, my meals now are much tastier than they used to be.
Are you good in the kitchen?
Oh, no, by no means. I'm very simple, but I don't know, there's something about tapping into a variety of cuisines that I didn't really do as often before. Indian food, Ethiopian food. Oh, Ethiopian is my favorite. There are a lot of places that largely, are vegetarian anyway. So, or they have, largely vegetarian diets. So, um, yeah, I always encourage people to get experimental in the kitchen with vegan options. It doesn't have to be like only dairy-free ice cream. Like, there are other things to do in the kitchen as a vegan.
And do you take any supplements as adjuncts to the vegan diet?
So far, medically, I've gotten checked and seen what levels, might be deficient or excessive or however you would measure them. But I actually am balanced. I don't take supplements currently. I'm not against them. I just simply am not the greatest at implementing new habits. um, but I do have a particular protein powder. It's actually my friend's company. It's called Glow. And the way that it's formulated, it's very, very bioavailable. So you're really retaining a lot of the nutrients that maybe you wouldn't from other protein powders. And it's packed with a lot of different ingredients that, for me, feel like, foundational fuel, vitamins, minerals, all. I could just read the package or whatever, but 10 out of 10 would recommend Glow to anyone. Um, and yeah, I think my diet's fairly balanced. No supplements so far, but we'll see over time. My levels now are actually healthier than they were before I was plant-based or vegan.
That's great. And you talked about specific movements and implementing those to help with mental health. Talk more about how that works.
Sure. So when we think of movement, we often categorize it as fitness or physical activity, as opposed to these more non athletic forms of simply understanding your mind body connection. We see with yoga that depending on, if you're practicing yoga from more of a traditional standpoint or the like Western commercialized version, there are these components to that mind body integration. But for us, my company, Movement Genius, we work with licensed somatic psychotherapists to design movement courses that actually help reduce stress, improve mood, sleep, to help you fully embody who you are and celebrate your unique way of moving through the world. And that can be done in a way that's always tailored to your preferences. It's tailored to your mood, your energy level. It can be as casual or creative as you want. But fundamentally, we'll do a variety of classes. Some of them are moving meditations where you simply mirror the instructor. There's an at your desk series, or for people who have limited mobility and are spending most of their time in chairs, you can do the movements from your chair. There's a series that's guided open movement where it's a little bit more creative and you explore your natural, I call it your natural body language, we can say. Um, so yeah, I think it's kind of expanding the definition of movement and also departing from the diet and fitness industry version where your body is a project to complete or an object to fix, and really welcoming this notion that your body is a living, robust environment. It's a source of innate intelligence. And when you integrate your mind and body, wow, I mean, you can really not only optimize your well being, but it shifts your awareness in how you show up in the world. For us at Movement Genius, yes, we are very focused on individual healing and well being, and also how that can translate to healthier work environments and, systems and ways of going about living life as a human.
And how do people go about accessing these classes? Is it in an app? Is it on YouTube?
Yes, so we are currently in beta and you can join the wait list at movementgenius.com. You can be the first to try the classes. Give us your honest feedback. We've had over 150,000 people tune into these classes, and it's been really profound to see the feedback. People just feeling like they get to reconnect with themselves in a way that maybe they haven't in a while, or establish a new way of approaching whatever life throws them that day. Like I said, it really is tailored to you. Um, and yeah, it's movementgenius.com, and you can also follow us on social at Movement Genius. But if you follow me at Alyson Stoner, you'll see the updates fairly regularly. and we're hoping to open up to the masses maybe this summer. We just want to make sure it's all in a good space. So get on the wait list and help us make the best possible classes for you.
That's great. And how did you first get turned on to this type of movement?
Well, I have always been interested in the mind and body connection. Throughout recovery, and I had to learn as someone who was experiencing alexithymia, literally how to reconnect my mind and body, one sensation, one emotion at a time. So I've also, been interested in neuroscience and contemplative practices and ancient traditions as well. Things that approach, health and well-being holistically. Um, and so, yeah, I've gotten, several certifications at this point, to facilitate trauma-informed movement or, creating psychologically safe environments. I've also been teaching movement more traditionally in dance for 15 years. So it's something that's near and dear to my heart. But I think now as we're seeing this Western version of mindfulness that kind of forgets the body, we're seeing this shift happen where people are going, huh, I'm storing the stress and the trauma and the anxiety in my body. I'm going to need to learn how to process, express, and release that in a way that works for me. So that's what we want to provide are those kinds of tools. And you can think of Movement Genius really as like headspace for the body.
And Allison, do you consider yourself a spiritual person?
Spiritual is such a broad term. And it's so specific to every person, but I would say the metaphysical, the invisible realm, the spiritual realm, however you would like to put it, is a core component. Um, Wisdom practices, these are all core components to my, yeah, daily lived experience. It's kind of ambiguous.
Earlier, I want to jump way back. Earlier, you talked about equine therapy and that being part of your treatment and something that had a profound effect on you. And that's not something I've ever heard of. So I'm curious, talk more about what that looks like and how that was so helpful for you.
Yes, when we were in the middle of family week in rehab, that means your family comes into town. You have some group discussions to maybe sort through different issues. You also establish what kinds of plans you'll have once you're home again. And one of the exercises was with two horses. And I was meant to draw with chalk the two main drivers of my eating disorder. Whatever the two main things that I felt were what really led me to commit to uh, that set of behaviors. For me, I chose fear and admiration. And so I both horses had, fear and admiration in chalk written on their bodies. And non-toxic. And, and then there were is it bales? Bales of hay? Little, mounds of hay. And, we labeled the 5 most important things in my life. So if, that was family or education or health or whatever, you you then let the horses go into this stable or this area. And naturally, what are they gonna gravitate to? The hay. But when that represents the thing that's most near to you and you watch fear or admiration getting mixed up in the things that are closest to you, you start to see how it affects how your eating disorder, the drivers of your eating disorder are affecting all of these crucial parts of your life. Now, I had to stand in the middle and I wasn't allowed to move, and I wasn't allowed to, uh, to, tell the horses directly anything. I had to communicate to my parents what I needed from them. And it was a whole exercise in me learning how to ask for support and use my voice to say, I'm seeing that fear is starting to mess with my career. Can you please help me A, B, or C? And I'm sure there's also like trail rides and just spending time with horses and with animals that can be so therapeutic. This was, a pretty elaborate psychological experiment. And, but it was so incredible to see how hard it was for me to ask for help and how vulnerable it felt, even with my own parents, to say, I'm struggling and I don't even know what to say right now, but can you do something, to reach those moments too of breaking and say, I don't know what to tell you to do, but can you help me, please? And for my parents to then have to go, okay, can we? Well, what can we do? What would be helpful? And for them to learn how to respond. So that was one of the experiences with equine therapy, and talk about transformative. If you have the ability to uh, experience anything like that, I do recommend. It's powerful, and of course the horses are well cared for, and nothing abusive happening there with the animals.
Fascinating. And since going through that experience and being forced to ask for help, is that something you found now is easier for you to handle in your day-to-day life?
Oh, I'm still so self-sufficient. I'm still so independent. Um, if we were to get into like attachment styles, I fall somewhere in the dismissive avoidant category. So I do like to be able to ask myself at any moment, what can I do first to care for this? But I will say, maybe over the last 5 or 6 years, I've really started to recognize who these people are in my life, who I can truly depend on, who I trust, whose advice and whose direction really are enriching and life giving, and that's nice to know. I still, yes, err on the side of DIY. um, but I will say, for my personal journey, there's something that I'm still learning about trusting that I'm competent and capable. I'm still, in some ways, I feel like a young adult. There are young parts of me who are still coming online, that are still coming online, learning how to manage day to day in ways that as a kid that was handled for me because I was working and performing all the time. So, I'm still recalibrating a bit, but as I establish that sense of confidence and competence, then yes, I'm like, okay, if I can do it once, now I'm more keen to ask for help if needed. I just want to make sure I'm not, you know, bypassing important, maturation processes.
I want to get into your journey into minimalism. I know at one point all your possessions you had you could fit into a car. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but let's go back to the beginning of that journey. How did you first, find out about it, and how quickly did you jump in?
Well, my lifestyle already reflected it. I didn't know there was a name. um, and I would say to a fault, actually. I have to be careful not to deprive myself of basic supplies. It goes beyond just squeezing every ounce of toothpaste from the tube. It's sometimes, uh, you know, getting it borderline into, why are you afraid to spend $1 on your basic needs? So just want to, acknowledge that. But I think it was also a bit compensatory, because my life in entertainment, I might be surrounded by these lavish spaces and people who live very luxurious lifestyles. And I didn't feel grounded in that, nor did I have the means to, there's a misconception here that everyone who's on TV is somehow rolling in the dough. It's not the case. Um, but yeah, I found that simplifying my space, simplifying my life not only helped me with how mobile I was moving all the time and just got so sick of packing things, but it also cleared, my mental space and allowed me to really focus on what's most important and to not be attached to material things. Like I said, it's easy for me actually to detach from material, so I could stand to really treasure a few items here and there. But the process, I used this game that I kind of made up called Keep, Toss, or Transform, and I asked myself, does this item, does this you can do it with any part of your life. Does this relationship, does this thought or belief lead to a greater sense of wholeness or a sense of fragmentation and brokenness? And if it leads to wholeness, then you go, great, keep it. If it's, 100% toxic and it's irredeemable, maybe you got to toss it. Chances are most things will fall into the category of, okay, it's not perfect, but we could improve it maybe. Um, and then you choose to transform it. So for me, when it came to belongings, I just looked and thought, what's the most essential stuff here? What am I using on a daily basis? And the rest of it, how could I pass this along to someone who would actually put it to use every day? Um, I think inviting other people into your process can be a great motivator when you think about redistributing resources to people who need them. When it was just, a miscellaneous item for you, that's like for me personally with my values, it's a no brainer. So I love that, things may flow to me, but then they flow through me and continue to be available for other people. Um, and I continue to keep, a carton of items as well as like boxes of items in my car, um, so that if I encounter someone who is in need of anything, I can pull over and we can open the trunk and say, you need a toothbrush? Great. You need, some clothing? Great. You need this item? Great. Um, and that's important to me that people get what they need.
And who would these people be? Just people that are out and about when you're grocery shopping, or how do you come in contact with them?
Sure. Well, living in Los Angeles, there are a lot of people experiencing homelessness. So, I don't permit myself the excuse of, oh shoot, I don't have any cash on me, or oh, I don't have anything on me, because all it takes is adding that into your routine when you're at the grocery store or, buying supplies to get a couple extra and store them away. For me personally. So, a lot of times it's people experiencing homelessness, and I've established some really long-lasting friendships with these folks as well. Two come to mind: a married couple, Kathy and Steve, and I'm so excited for them. After 8 years of experiencing homelessness, they are now in a place of their own again, and so being able to be a part of people's stories and saying, "Hey, this isn't the end. This is just where we are currently," means a lot. And then sometimes it's like, you're running between meetings and someone says, "Oh my gosh, I really, I left this at home," and I'm like, "Oh, huh, I randomly have that in my car." So it's just staying available, and when you're prepared, it's funny how, your eyes start to detect, you just start to notice, oh, I have something that I can offer here, ways that I can help and serve.
So, Allison, when we were talking about the equine therapy, you talked about fear, and going back to 2018, you did something very bold and had to face your fear when you were coming out, when you wrote that article in Teen Vogue. I'm just curious, going through that experience, do you think what you went through in recovery and the tools you learned there was part of allowing you to do that work, not work, but allowing you to go deep and share with everybody your deepest truth. That's the perfect word for it.
I would absolutely say that healing in general is, it works for you and not against you, in terms of living authentically and living truthfully. There were a lot of reasons that I decided to come out. One of the major reasons at the time was that I was in a relationship with a woman, and there was a sense of silencing that reality and not allowing us a safe place to be openly affectionate ever because I was hiding. And so I wanted, as a gesture to her at the time, I really wanted to demonstrate that I was invested in this very, loving, life giving, at the time relationship. Um, and it's interesting how love has a way of moving you to do things that otherwise were just too risky. I really wanted to do my best to show her that. And there were a lot of risks there with professional obligations. Some people didn't bring me back for second seasons, and some people viewed me as being harmful to be teaching children, so I wasn't allowed back in certain places. Um, and then others celebrated it and welcomed me with open arms. So I would say, yeah, healing and recovery, of course, play a role in this, but it's this journey is it's all encompassing and it's every day. You really have to you're either, waking up and saying, "Okay, I'm willing to listen to life and to learn," or that's not how you view this existence. And both are okay. It's totally up to you. I'm just of the mind that, like, man, I really want to do what I can while I'm here with what I got, with who I am. What How can I live the story that I really want to tell?
Well, you shared a little bit there about the positives and the negatives that people expressed when you came out. I'm curious though, on a personal level, how healing and transformative was sharing that with the world for you?
Hmm. At the time, it was mostly nerve-wracking. Now, I know that it was paving the way to be at ease and confident in my skin in every room, and, I'm so, so deeply grateful. It also, because I came from, more of a conservative, Christian background, that I chose for myself, not really necessarily my family. It gave me a chance to really unpack the principles and the worldviews that were driving my day, and not only to unpack them at that level, but to go, okay, where did these stem from historically, and I mean to really research and dig, and I think that was really empowering. If I was going to come forward and make a statement, I knew I would be interrogated from all sides. So, in the spirit of being my overachieving self still, I was like, all right, let me know what I'm talking about here. Um and I ended up learning so much more than I ever would have had I not had to wrestle with such core pieces of who I am. So, you know, for all intents and purposes, being attracted to a woman was the best thing that ever happened to me.
And earlier we briefly touched on your sense of spirituality. You touched on religion there. Is religion something that fits into your world these days, or is that something that you've let go?
I'm not sure I would use that term at the moment. However, I deeply understand the religious paradigms, and yeah, this is a much longer discussion. But suffice it to say, my view has only expanded. It's only transcended in a way that the evidence of my life, hopefully, shows more love, uh, more grace, more kindness, more truth. Um, and I guess that's actually the easiest way to put it for now is I would love to be able to show you my faith without using words. And if you can't see it, if you can't see what's driving me, um, then either we have different filters that we're looking through, or maybe I could stand to walk the walk a bit more. But all that to say, the words like faith, man, that's such a loaded term, and I just want to veer away from anyone assuming a particular definition. We would need many hours to go into a lot of different things.
Fair enough. Well, Allison, I really appreciate what you're doing in the world. Your journey is just such a beautiful one, and I'm just so happy for you from, where you've been, where you've come, and sharing that with the world in such a vulnerable and honest way that's helping inspire and transform. So I really appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate you coming on the show and just being so real with me. And how can the listeners connect with you after the show?
Thank you. And thank you for such a great conversation. Listeners, hey everyone, you can find me at Alyson Stoner pretty much on every social media platform, and feel free to direct message. I do keep an eye on them. And if you want to try some movement just to feel better in your own skin, please check out movementgenius.com. Join our wait list, and let's all, get healthier in a way that works for us.
Right on. I'm going to link everything up in the show notes. Allison, before we part ways, any final words?
Ooh, the motto of the year so far is hold tightly loosely. So whatever that means to people, uh, I'm just gonna share that with you. Take every day in a way where you can just hold tightly loosely. You can care and still show up, but then also accept that life moves in a lot of mysterious ways. Hold tightly loosely.
Beautiful. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.